let's talk about the 7 reasons why Peter Buttigieg is not a progressive. Number 1, as many of you know, Chelsea Manning was arrested for providing information that was classified. Now, Peter Buttigieg, who, if you don't know, he's a mayor from South Bend, Indiana. He criticized Chelsea Manning, who was a former Army intelligence analyst, for giving away this classified information. He also criticized Snowden and other whistleblowers. He actually has a military past. He left his day job as mayor to serve as lieutenant in the Navy Reserve in Afghanistan in 2014. And then he returned back into office. And he said that while he was deployed, he was the one that had to read all of the intelligence briefs. So to him, he's saying they abused access to classified information. The problem I have with this is the fact that he is putting this idea of obedience, of obeying something, even if it's not right, even if it's something so terrible, like journalists being gunned down, right? He's putting that kind of blind law over the morality of letting the American people know. And that's problematic, because the last thing we need is another president that is going to continue lying to the American people. So that right there just completely does it for me, in my opinion. Number 2, he doesn't really support Medicare for all. He said, single-payer healthcare system is the right place for us to head as a country, while saying a Medicare for all program doesn't necessarily require doing away with private insurance. He talked about a public option. So he's pretty much saying that access to affordable healthcare is the way to go, which we know what that means. I mean, many of us know what that means. When a candidate tells you access to affordable healthcare, I support that. That means that they don't support Medicare for all, really. It's another way of like gaslighting and turning things around and saying, oh, I support access to affordable healthcare, but that's not specifically Medicare for all. And it's also that the fact that he's saying that private insurance is going to remain there, and he's specifically saying that it's just going to be part of a separate plan. So he said, if the framework we're using is Medicare, a lot of people who have Medicare also have Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage, something like that, Buttigieg added. So if we want to make Medicare available to everybody, whether it's a public option to buy in or simply establishing that that's how the payer structure works in this country, that's going to be the center of gravity. So he was wishy-washy. He's basically saying, oh yeah, I support Medicare for all, but it would just be a public option. You don't need both. Like, it's one or the other. And it's another way of kind of being wishy-washy with the whole situation. And I think it's very problematic that we have someone that can't commit to Medicare for all. To me, that's the end all be all of things. It's the kind of thing that we really, really need, because thousands of people die, and millions overall. And we are the one country that doesn't have it, the most developed nation that doesn't have this. We are a nation that has so much wealth, but yet we're not providing people a simple, basic human right like Medicare for all. And on top of that, you're saying that the system as it is working when it's not. So that's completely out of touch, and we don't need that. Number 3, his problems with minority communities is very significant. So first off, he said a really stupid thing that as a politician, you should be aware of. And as a presidential candidate, you don't make mistakes like this. And he said this in 2015, I believe, but he should have known that this was going to come up. So according to a transcript of the speech reproduced in the South Bend Voice, he said, we need to take both those things seriously. He said, for the simple and profound reason that all lives matter. So I can give you guys context, came after Buttigieg demoted the city's first black police chief, Darryl Boykins, and fired the police office communications director in the wake of a federal investigation into whether they had secretly recorded fellow officers. Boykins sued the city, arguing that he was demoted based on his race. And all 3 of those police chiefs who have served have since been white. So it doesn't look good. It doesn't seem good. And the case goes a lot further. But on top of that is the fact that the city, South Bend's population is 26% African American and 14% Hispanic, but the entire police force is only 5% Black and 5% Hispanic. This, as someone who's lived in places where, like, I've lived near St. Louis and Sanford, where both Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown was the other one I was going to say, where there was a lot of racial disparity. Like the law enforcement officers were white and the victims were often Black and the community surrounding them were Black. And in these places, when you have that, it really doesn't elicit trust, and it kind of pits these two people against each other. But to say something as like vapid as all lives matter, it's not smart. It just shows that you don't have an ability to figure it out. Because if you know anything about the phrase, all lives matter is a contradictory message to the Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter, of course, is there to emphasize the fact that Black people specifically are dying at the hands of law enforcement officers, and, violence through police officers has increased. And it's there to highlight the fact that it doesn't seem like these lives matter at all. So they're telling you Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, is basically kind of glossing over that and just saying, well, all lives matter. Well, yes, all lives matter, but obviously to some, Black lives don't matter as much. So that's the whole point, and he should have known better. Another thing regarding his kind of tension with his people, although he's advocated for workers' rights and highlighted his commitment to creating new jobs and economic opportunities, the Black and white gap in wealth in South Bend is extremely wide. African Americans make about half as much as the white residents in South Bend, and unemployment rate is almost twice as high. So it's kind of one of those things where if you are the mayor, like Mayor Garcetti in LA, who wanted to run for president, right? But he didn't because Kamala. If you're the mayor and your town is completely having racial tensions, and you have people that are distrusting the police officers and people in charge, and you have this whole thing going on in your community, and you're trying to run for president, I just don't get it. Because if you can't do that locally, how are you going to do it nationally? How are you going to take on this type of international relations in addition to the international efforts that need to happen, right? So to me, this is just one of the things that really threw him out. And I also wanted to talk about how this city council woman tried to run for public office because Buttigieg did this whole redevelopment program where he cleared homes. And while he was doing that, a lot of people complained because he pretty much gentrified the towns. So during his very first term, Buttigieg cleared about 1,000 vacant homes in 1,000 days. But he made it seem like, it's revitalizing the community. It's taking away the shitty downtown neighborhoods, and it's going to make everything safer. It's going to make everything prettier. But locals thought it was gentrification, and that's what it sounds like to me living in LA. This is what happens all the time. Businesses do this all the time, big business. And police chief now acknowledged that the city was accused of clearing properties without regard for those living in them. So it's one of those things where he's saying, I'm going to be friendly to communities of color. I'm going to, support the working class. Yet, he's not working class. He never has been. Let's go on to number 4. Number 4. There's an important issue here is that Buttigieg has said he's against military interventionism, but he hasn't said he's against meddling and helping other countries, which is still interventionism. In the town hall he had, he literally advocated for a form of public service for young adults, basically a type of military service. And he said it was a way to create unity among Americans. So he wants to possibly enlist you guys in a type of military kind of form, and who knows where that's going to go. I mean, he didn't specifically say he was going to make it mandatory, but he said if it's not mandatory, then at least a year, or he's trying to find a way to make this mandatory. I mean, why would you train for the military if you're not going to be in a war? You know what I mean? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, you can build unity through other things, through forming co-ops, to getting in unions, through like engaging in arts or other things. Like, why does it have to be this form of military? And again, unlike Tulsi, who has a military background and who has said no war, no interventionism, I'm not going to go invade Venezuela, we're not going to go continue listening to Saudi Arabia, and we're not going to continue, creating these regime change wars. He doesn't talk about that. And he's completely trying to get us back into that war mentality. He also mentioned that for him and several former presidents, and he named JFK and George H.W. Bush, serving in the military allowed them to meet and build trust with people of starkly different backgrounds, education, and income. So, because he served in the Navy from 2009 to 2017, and he was in Afghanistan, he thinks that this is just gonna bring people together. I just don't think the war mentality brings people together. I think saying, I don't want to go to war, we're not going to engage in wars, and we're not going to spend more money on wars, and we're going to use that money on our people, I think that's going to unite people. When people feel like they're being heard, instead of we're wasting all this money fighting wars, creating refugees. We don't need another war hawkish president, and while he's saying one thing, he's obviously supporting another. Number 5. So while Buttigieg did not meet with AIPAC, you certainly know where he stands on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because he said that Israel's security arrangements were moving and clear-eyed, and he said the U.S. could learn something from them, and he blamed Palestinians and Hamas for the misery in Gaza. He took a very pragmatic military-like approach, and I get it, but he said seeing the way that a country can be, on one hand, very intentional, very serious, and very effective when it comes to security, and on the other hand, not allowing concerns about security to dominate your consciousness. I think that's a very important lesson, and that hopefully Americans can look to how we think about to navigate a world that unfortunately has become smaller and more dangerous for all of us. He's literally telling us that we should learn something from Israel. Israel right now, and this has nothing to do with the people of Israel, has nothing to do with the Jewish heritage and the ethnicity. It has to do with Netanyahu's right-wing government, right? He's saying that we could learn something from this government. I don't understand how it doesn't make it any more clear than that, where he stands. Netanyahu's government is right-wing. 100%. Even Israelis agree to that. So when someone like him, who's running as a progressive, is saying, oh, we could learn something from this government, obviously he's not a progressive. He's not even center. He's to the right of that. He's pretty much a Republican. And again, this adds to another fact of his war hawkish kind of nature. And that's the last thing we need. He further goes and talks about how we need to cement our connection to Israel, and our allyship is so important. When the United States spends so much money arming Israel, arming Saudi Arabia, and doing their bidding, we're doing Netanyahu's bidding, who just got reelected, and we really don't need that. And it's one of those things that, again, it's the antithesis of what we need. It's the antithesis of what Tulsi's doing. It's the antithesis of what Bernie Sanders is doing. And you wonder why the Democrats are trying as hard as they can to literally get rid of both of those people. And it's only both of those people that they ignore. It's only them. Think about why. So, Number 6. So this just happened, and this is pretty bad. So according to a list CNBC got from the campaign aides, Peter Buttigieg's increasingly popular presidential run has drawn the support of more than 24 Democratic fundraisers, including people who bundled big dollar donations for Barack and Hillary Clinton during their White House bids. And the financiers on the roster range from U.S. Secretary of Ambassadors to real estate executives to just former people involved in politics, big honchos, big establishment types. And they're all pretty much saying, hey, we're here for you and we're going to give you all this money because we think that you're going to serve our interests. That's pretty much what's happening. These people did not approach Bernie Sanders because they knew Bernie Sanders wasn't going to take it. They didn't approach Tulsi Gabbard because they knew that she wasn't going to take it. They're approaching all the establishment type of candidates. And before I go on to the last point, I just want to reiterate, with the round of superdelegates that they can't vote until the second round of superdelegates. But if Bernie Sanders doesn't get more than 50% of the vote, there is a chance that they could name somebody else. And we don't want to risk that chance, right? We just discussed it in the town hall segment. Bernie discussed it with the Fox News people. And right now it just seems they're trying everything but Bernie. It just kind of seems like that. But there's confirmation that that's exactly what they're doing. And this is why my one criticism of Bernie during the Fox News town hall is that he was a little bit too, it should go well. I mean, I expect the DNC, who we've been talking to almost every day, to follow through. And I don't expect them to do that. There's no reason to expect them to do that. And here's why. Number 7. This is the most important one. So, about 100 wealthy liberal donors in San Francisco last month were worried about the prospect of Bernie Sanders' nomination. And they said that it's no coincidence that the series of Stop Sander dinners began being reported. So it's not just one dinner, it's been several. And the New York Times kind of broke the story. And this is what they actually pretty much said. And this is what's in there. It says, and we can look at it right here, the matter of what to do about Bernie. And that's a capital what to do about Bernie. And the larger imperative of party unity has, for example, hovered over a series of previously undisclosed Democratic dinners in New York and Washington, organized by the longtime party financier Bernard Schwartz. The gatherings have included scores from the moderate or center left wing of the party, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader, former Governor Terry McAuliffe of Virginia, Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, himself a presidential candidate, and the president of Center for American Progress, Neera Tanden. So, all of these people, including Buttigieg, are gathering and formulating ways how to stop Bernie from winning the nomination. And here's the funny thing, we're never going to hear about Bernie having a secret meeting and to find ways to do something shady because he's a front runner and they can't handle that. They literally are doing their hardest. They're trying everything they can to ensure that he loses. They are throwing us all of these candidates, as I mentioned, and not only that, now they're coming together, all the elites, the party elites, the Chuck Schumers and Nancy Pelosi's, who dismissed the Green New Deal, who dismissed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who dismissed the 5 Congress people and said, oh, those are just 5 people. The Dianne Feinsteins of the party who dismissed climate change and the importance of a Green New Deal. All of these people are coming together to put their money, their energy, and all of their power in fighting Bernie Sanders. That's what they're doing. And the fact that they're doing this should be extremely disturbing amidst everything that's happening. I mean, they're willing to censor and jail people who tell you that these things are happening. They wanted to censor and jail Assange and Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden because they were telling you just how corrupt they are. And this is like all connected. This is all a continuation of it. And the fact that the establishment is trying to paint Peter Buttigieg as someone that speaks beautifully, 7 languages or however many languages he speaks. And, and they're focusing on the fact that he is gay. I have zero problems, and the majority of us criticizing him have zero issues with the fact that he's gay. In fact, I think that's amazing. That's not my criticism of him. The criticism lies in the manipulation, the tokenizing of them using the identity politics of this man to make him into something that he isn't. He is not a progressive. And you can look at his legislation. You can even pull up his FEC. You can pull up his open secrets. You can do all of that. But on top of all of that, you just look at his actions and his legislation in the past. And I didn't even mention lack of experience, but there's that. But what to me is most disturbing of all is the fact that the Democratic establishment is doing everything they can to fight against the Democrats, the progressive wing of the Democrats. And that's not surprising to us truth tellers and people on YouTube and, the Jimmy Dores and Nico Houses. It's not surprising to us because we know. But it's surprising to still a lot of people that they're willing to do that. So I'm willing to say still that our biggest threat as progressives, as people who just want transparency in government, as people who want things to get better for 99%, not just the 1%. As those people, we need to realize that our biggest enemy right now at this very moment are not the Republicans and the Donald Trumps. We know where they stand. We know who they are. But our biggest enemies are the ones closest to us, the ones in our own party, the Democratic Party. They are the biggest enemies, the establishment, and they're doing everything they can. And believe me, they will do everything they can to ensure that Bernie Sanders doesn't win the primary, which is why progressives have to come together and support an actual progressive, whether it's Bernie Sanders or whether it's Tulsi, because pretty much, and those are the only two that have a chance. And in my opinion, and Mike Gravel is amazing, but he said he wasn't really running. He said I don't know, he might drop out. I think he's pretty awesome though, and I love his Twitter. I know it's run by 2 17-year-olds, but Andrew Yang is so. I mean, he has some issues. The UBI thing is good, but also under a capitalist system, UBI doesn't work. I mean, even if it's one of any of those people, here's the thing, the Democratic establishment is trying to literally put one of these chosen ones down your throat. And no matter which of those you choose to vote for, whoever you choose to vote for, ultimately, you have to understand that that's not okay. And it's our job as truth tellers and as people in media to inform others about this. And that's why it's so important that people know the facts, because a lot of people don't do research. They don't want to, they don't have the time, whatever it is. So these are all just snippets of the things that aren't good about Peter Buttigieg. And I just wanted to go over that today. So thank you guys for watching. My name is Fiorella Isabel. You can find me on Twitter, Fiorella_IM. Thanks for watching. CONVO out.